If you have a scary story you'd like to hear on the channel, then go to mariesfield.com and send it my way. And of course, thank you. I had the story written out for quite some time now, but I was hesitant to share it just because I'm sure it can lead to bad memories for some. But after getting permission from those involved, I decided it would be a good idea if not, as another way of telling those, you can get away from toxic relationships as well. So this is a quick warning to my story. After college, I moved back to my home state and into a house with an old friend of mine, Alma. She lived in a house that was owned by her parents, and she had just paid them for rent. However, it was a 3-bedroom, 2-bath, so she figured why not have a few friends she trusted move in, that way it makes the rent even less. So I made the long drive back home, and Alma greeted me and helped me bring in the few belongings I had. After talking for some time, our other roommate showed up and Alma introduced us. Her name was Yesenia, and they met at the local community college they went to. She was a very sweet girl. She was always very polite and considerate of us when it came to anything she did around the house. She was fun to hang out with around the house or talk to, and quickly opened up to me as well. Another thing I learned about her was that she had horrible taste in men, which also ties into me meeting her boyfriend. Let's call him Rick. You could tell he thought highly of himself. He was self-absorbed and very inconsiderate. That alone was infuriating, but the outward aggression to Yesenia and sometimes us was unbelievable. When they were playing around and he was fed up, he would smack her arm away or shove her back and raise his voice at her. Not that it's any better doing it in private, but it was just awkward seeing it happen right in front of us. Because of all his antics, Alma said he wasn't allowed over there anymore. Yesenia seemed indifferent about it though, like she knew what was going on wasn't right, but she accepted the outcome. Hell, we even tried convincing her that she should probably just leave him because if it hadn't already, it was bound to get worse. But as they always do, she claimed she would be okay, so we just moved on from there. It wasn't till a couple months after this, so maybe about 8 months since I moved in, I believe that this happened. Yesenia had started staying at Rick's place more and more. It was just on the weekends, but it became more and more frequent. Until one time, she texted Alma saying she was going over there and when she would be back, and we didn't see her for a week. No calls, no texts, nothing. We were rightfully worried. I even dropped by her work and asked for her. She worked at a salon and they knew me and Alma, so they told me that she didn't finish all her appointments a couple of days prior and called in the last 2 days. Unfortunately, we didn't have the slightest idea where Rick lived, other than it was in an apartment. And since her coworkers confirmed it was her that called in, the police couldn't file a missing person either, so all we could do was wait around. Finally, she came home late one night while we were both watching a movie in the living room. I think she was hoping we would be in bed by then, as we startled each other when she entered. We started piecing things together pretty quickly the more we stood there talking and asking questions. She had a pretty poor makeup job on her chin and cheek, where she was trying to cover up bruises. We begged her to cut it off with him before things got worse, and she said she would. She just had to get him to calm down as well as the swelling before he would let her go. We tried to keep her occupied as much as possible and even took her to work, hoping he wouldn't show up if her car wasn't there. I thought we did a pretty good job too at the time. It wasn't long after she returned though, maybe a bit longer than a week. The bruising was pretty much gone, and she even seemed to be acting like herself again. I was off this day and offered to take her to work, and she declined, saying she was going to drive herself. She said she was going straight to work and back home with no other plans, and knowing her schedule, I thought it'd be fine, so I agreed. I was wanting to make something specific for dinner that night, so after going to the store that day, I went home and started prepping. That's when I realized I had forgotten something I needed or was low on said item. I didn't want to go back to the store, so I texted Alma asking her to get it on her way home. A few hours later, Yesenia actually texted me saying she was going to stop by the store and wanted to let me know. I thought this was perfect and asked her to get what I needed instead and told Alma never mind. While I was making dinner though, I noticed it had been about 2 hours since Yesenia got off work and thought she definitely should have been home by now. She didn't work more than about 20 minutes from our place, and the store probably would have only added an hour, and that was being generous. So I called her to see if she was okay. She didn't answer, and in fact, it seemed like my call was ignored. So I tried calling again, and that time, it went straight to voicemail. I started to become worried, so I called Alma to have her try too, and she had the same results. She agreed to swing by her work and the store to see if she could see her car, and I started putting stuff away so I could help. We talked Yesenia into giving us his address as well, in case anything ever happened again, so my plan was to drive by there to see if I could find her too. We had a feeling she was still talking to him, but she was an adult, so we can only say or suggest or even do so much. She had to make her own choices, but I was praying she at least wasn't still seeing him or trying to work it out with him. I went to my room to grab my purse, and as I was leaving, I heard the door open and slam shut, as well as heavy breathing. From the front door, you enter the living room, and to the right is the kitchen. Straight back from the kitchen was the hall that led to Yesenia's room and a bathroom, and the hall to the left of the kitchen led to mine and Alma's rooms, with our shared bathroom. As I started walking towards the living room, I called out, hoping it was Yesenia, when she came running around the wall, visibly shaken. I tried to ask her what was wrong, but it took everything I could to snap her back, it seemed. She had been crying. Her hair was a mess, and she looked genuinely terrified. She told me it was Rick. He was trying to get her to get in his car, and he had a gun. Sure, I was scared, but I tried to calm her down to say that she was safe, but she mentioned him following her. It didn't take long for me to piece it together, so I told her to go hide in my room, thinking he wouldn't think to check there, hopefully, and immediately went to make sure the door was locked and to grab my phone from the charger in the living room. To my relief, Yesenia had locked the door, but as I looked through the blinds, I saw Rick walking up. I didn't know what to do, so I tried playing it off when he started banging on it. I tapped on the window when he noticed me, and I yelled out the door that he wasn't supposed to be there. It became a short argument at that point, him asking for Yesenia, and I told him she wasn't here. He tried to call my bluff because her car was out front, but I tried convincing him she probably parked it here to throw him off, and that she may have gone to the gas station down the street. That's when I noticed he just got quiet, but he hadn't left. I quickly learned what his next plan was when he started throwing himself at the door. I grabbed my phone and called 911 and ran to my room. I saw Yesenia peeking her head out from my closet, and I told her to stay hidden no matter what. As I started explaining to the operator what was happening, I heard a loud crash. Then I could hear him yelling for her. I heard him throwing and smashing things. Then he got close to my room. Our rooms don't have locks, so all I could do was stand there frozen as to what he could do. He stood in my doorway with his weapon of choice in hand and demanded I tell him where she was. Again, I tried telling him she wasn't there, and he threatened to come back for me if I was lying. I thought I was going to die or at least get sick right there. It seemed like it lasted forever, and in the back of my mind, I was angry that no one had shown up for help at this point. But as he grabbed my wrist again, demanding me to go with him to find her, I started pulling back when I could hear the sirens getting louder. It didn't take him long to process what was happening as he let go of me, running off, leaving me to fall to the floor. I got up and checked to see where he went, but our place was empty. Then I heard a cop call out from the door. Yesenia and I immediately ran out and started explaining what had happened. Apparently, she was using the store as an excuse to see him. She said she wanted to meet in public and only briefly talk. However, he had other ideas and tried dragging her back to his car, but she managed to escape and drive back here. Then I told them what happened at our place and gave them his description. That part was more for confirmation, as they saw a guy running from our backyard and he had thrown something over a fence, so they stopped him. Thankfully, he wasn't out for long. I know we probably shouldn't have pushed her so hard, but we did convince her to press charges, so between what he did to me and her, and the damage to Alma's house, he went away for a long time. Yesenia went to stay with her mom for a while, but still came over a lot to hang out with us as we continued to live together for several years later. As bad as it was, I definitely think we all became closer and have this cool sister bond now. All jokes aside though, I know those situations are never easy, but just watch for those warning signs and ask for help if you ever need it. And as for Rick, I hope you never meet anyone outside that cell, ever again. Hey y'all, I wanted to share something that me and a few friends experienced in high school. I think I was a bit of a weirdo in school, but I wasn't alone. I had plenty of friends that accepted my weirdness and were probably just as equally goofballs. We were the ones using paper clips and safety pins as earrings, drawing creepy stuff and other probably edgy things. I cringe at the thought of my teenage years now. Anyways, while we may have been odd, we still wanted to enjoy the events our school had, such as the fundraisers, parades, and even prom. A couple of my friends and I all agreed to go to prom together, and one of my friends even tried to hook me up with this girl I had been interested in. He had asked her if she was available. Actually, he told her I was asking, and she said yes, so our first date would be prom, I guess. I actually gave a little more care as to how I looked and even got a matching tie to her corsage. I picked her up from her place and we met our friends at the community center where they were having the dance. My date was stunning, and it was hard to believe she was with me. She said I looked good, and even some of the teachers that were there told me I cleaned up well and joked that they wish they saw me more like this. I wasn't the best student, but I wasn't a troublemaker either. We were all having a great night between dancing and flirting, eating some of the food they had, and just BSing with each other. At one point, while we were talking, I noticed a guy who kind of seemed out of place. Even the teachers and adults were dressed nice, and this guy was just in jeans and a suit jacket. I watched as he walked along the wall, looking around, almost like he was trying to find someone. But it was the way he held himself and looked around that had me on edge. There was an eerie intensity to his gaze at everyone that made me feel like he had no good intentions. Now, while he looked very off-putting, No one else was looking at him or watching him, so I was starting to think that maybe it was just me. I tried to brush it off as just being prom jitters and that maybe I was just on edge due to the circumstances. So, at the time, I just let it go. I continued dancing and talking with my friends, and at one point, we found a table and about 6 of us were sitting at it. My date had her legs in my lap, complaining that they were hurting as she had been wearing heels. While talking, I spotted the suit jacket guy again, and also noticed he was now walking towards us. I looked back at my friends, trying to find a time to ask if they recognized him, but he stood next to my date's chair and greeted us before I had the chance. He asked us if we were enjoying ourselves, and we all said yeah. We brought up a few things like the music in one of the drink stations, and we conversed for a few. As the conversation died down, the guy then asked us what we were doing after the dance, which I thought was an odd question. One of my friends mentioned probably just chilling somewhere, and the guy asked us if we wanted to go smoke somewhere. I know everyone at the table, including myself, did, but it was really weird to have an adult offer this to us. We all kind of side-eyed one another, and I spoke up first and was like, "Nah, man, we're good. Thanks, though." And no one else said anything. He then pushed it again, offering. He said it wasn't a setup or anything, and specifically pointed at me and said, "I know you like grass, boy, don't lie," and started laughing. This accusation did not make me feel more comfortable about him either. In fact, the way he looked at me and pointed at me made me think it was more like intimidation, like he had something on me. So without looking away from him or smiling like I did the first time, I just said, "No one's lying, man. We're just not interested." I was hoping he might get the hint that I wanted him to leave us alone, but he didn't. He then focused on my date. He complimented her on her looks, and she seemed a little standoffish, but was being polite to the guy. Until he started making more explicit comments to my date and the other girls. My date had put her legs down and seemed to push her back more towards me, as if she was nervous this guy was close to her. Nobody was saying anything, and being that I was already nervous and suspicious of this guy, I was now annoyed that he wasn't getting the hint. So I stood up, called him a few names, and told him he needed to leave. I also very loudly made a comment about him hitting on teens and stood there, hoping he would finally get the hint, or that maybe another adult would come over. The guy again laughed as he stood up and said if we changed our minds to meet him at a certain park. I watched as he walked away, but also noticed our gym teacher start to walk over to us. He asked us who that guy was, and I basically asked him the same thing. I thought he was another staff member or part of the faculty chaperoning the dance, since he was obviously an adult. The gym teacher then hollered for the creep and started walking towards him when he just took off. Our gym teacher then ran after him too, and we were left wondering who that guy was. We all tried to loosen up again, hoping that wouldn't completely sour our night, but we then had another teacher approach us saying we needed to follow them because they had more questions about what just happened. After we explained it all to them, they told us that they were handling it and to go back to the dance and enjoy our time. Thankfully, we were able to have a good rest of the night, but when we separated afterwards, I was still left wondering about this guy. Who was he, and how did he end up at the prom without any of the other teachers or even other students feeling like he didn't belong? I spotted him pretty quickly and knew something wasn't right. I was kicking myself for not reporting him sooner, but I didn't know all the people that worked for the school or the district, so I just assumed it was me being paranoid. That was until the following week, when I was called into the principal's office where I saw one of my other friends from that night and a police officer. The principal said the officer wanted to know more about the incident and asked for a description of the man. After explaining this, the officer showed us a picture of a guy. It was an obvious mugshot, and it was the same guy. They thanked us for our explanation and sent us off back to class. That day, my mom picked me up from school and asked us about the cop at the school and what all he said. I had told her about the incident at prom, so she was already aware, but she said she also got an email that the school sent out to everyone about this guy. It mentioned that they had a suspicious and unidentified person in the area that was also reported by students, and they reacted quickly by calling authorities. Later that night, a cop had stopped behind a car that was parked near our school with all their lights off and questioned them. Our gym teacher saw the guy leaving in a car and gave them the details as well. The car and the guy matched the description, so they detained him. They sent the email letting them know that he was still in custody after being identified by witnesses, and if they had any other questions, they could call the school or the officer handling the case. It was a relief to know that guy wasn't out walking around, but also creeped me out just that much more, knowing that he was still nearby, like he was waiting. I wanted to include this, but of course, I can't confirm the validity of it, as it was all from word of mouth. One of my friends said that their parents called the officer and they told him that they searched his car and found rope, duct tape, a knife, condoms, and weed. The weed at least matches up to the story he was feeding us that night, but if that information was true, then what the hell was his plan? It puts shivers down my spine thinking what could have happened if any of us went with him that night. For the most part, it was a fantastic night, but it was also very memorable for us, for multiple reasons. From then on, I promised myself that if anything ever seemed off, especially when it comes to another person, I would tell someone immediately. I'm glad no one went with him that night, but it's always in the back of my mind of what could have happened. When I was 16, I had a bit of a problem with authority, and I snuck out of the house pretty frequently. My parents and I never really had a good relationship, honestly. They were overbearing, and I, like I mentioned, had this weird complex with authority. I had that 16-year-old mentality that I was invulnerable, and that no one could touch me or do anything to hurt me. If anyone out there is around that age and has that mindset, let me tell you that you are not invincible, and this story was my wake-up call to that fact. This happened one time when I had snuck out and decided that I was going to walk to my local gas station for a Red Bull and some candy. I had some cash from my birthday, and it was quickly burning a hole in my pocket, so I figured I could spend about $10 at the gas station, and it would be good enough for now. It was the middle of spring, and about midnight, so I had my window open to get the cool air in anyways. My window was easy to pop the screen out of, which I knew because I had once had to crawl in it when I had forgotten my key at home one morning during the school year. So I pushed on the corner of the screen, and sure enough, it had popped out of the frame. I quietly crawled my way out into the backyard and was able to get out of the gate without issue. I knew that neither of my parents were going to wake up to any of it. I'd done this enough to know what to do to keep the escape silent and get away without anyone finding out. I got out of my yard and started walking down the road to the gas station down the street. It was about a 20-minute walk from the house to the station, so I put in my headphones and started listening to some music on my iPod. I got to the station without issue and walked in. The clerk just kind of stared at me, as he did every time I walked in alone in the middle of the night. I ignored it, grabbed my drink and a few pieces of candy, and then went to the desk to check out. After I put the items on the counter, the clerk just kept staring at me like something was wrong. I was a bit annoyed, so I asked him what. He then spoke up and asked me how old I was. I lied and told him that I was 17. I don't know why I didn't say 18, but I figured 17 was old enough to be doing what I was doing. He stared at me with that look of, I know you're BSing me, but rang up my items and told me the total. After I paid and he gave me the cash, he leaned in and asked if I wanted to make some extra money. I shook my head and asked what he was talking about, and he slowly reached down and grabbed his zipper. I just turned to walk away and told him that he was an effing creep and left. And while that was creepy, that's actually not where it ended. After leaving and starting my way back home, a pickup actually pulled up behind me and slowed down to match my pace. They didn't get to the point where the window or driver was even with me. They got to the point where they were right behind me and just kept an even pace with me. This kept on for several minutes on the walk, and the second I turned around to see who the hell it was, they slammed on the gas pedal and gunned it past me down the road, and then made an incredibly fast, sharp right turn. After this, I figured I should probably make the trip quicker than I had been going. I was basically speed walking down the road and was cutting through people's yards to cut the trip short. I turned onto my road, and as soon as I did, who else would be heading in the opposite direction but that pickup from earlier? As soon as I saw it, I was hoping that it hadn't seen me, but he started speeding up in my direction pretty much immediately. I booked it as best as I could in my flip-flops, and every time I turned around, the truck was getting closer. I was pushing myself to go as fast as I possibly could, trying to get back to my house so I could get into my backyard, but I knew that I wasn't going to make it. My only hope at this point was to go in the front door and just face the music, because if I went in the front, I was definitely going to wake up my parents, as it was right by their bedroom door. I started booking it toward my front door, and to my surprise, this truck stopped in front of my house, sat there for a moment, and then screeched out their tires as they gunned it down the road. I stood there for a moment, my heart pounding, and was just thinking, holy shit, what the hell was that? After I was certain that they weren't around anymore, I made my way over to the side of the house, opened the gate, then crawled back through my window. As I got back in my room, I could hear my mom and dad talking, specifically my dad asking what the hell was going on, and I heard him opening the front door, I assumed to look out front. I just sat on my bed, trying to gather my thoughts and really piece together what exactly that was. I honestly think that the guy at the gas station knew someone else that he had called and that they had planned to grab me off the road. Part of me assumes that at the beginning, the guy in the truck was on the phone with the attendant and he was confirming I was the person that he wanted, and they had lost me for a bit until I got over to my street. Obviously, this is just speculation, but it was still creepy as hell, and it was pretty clear that the guy in the truck was trying to scare me or find me. I think he just gave up when I got to my house, for what reason I really don't know. I really should have told my parents, since this guy now knew where I lived, but nothing else ever came of it, and I never saw the truck again. And though that was the truth, this night could have ended a hell of a lot worse. This was actually the last time I snuck out, mostly because I had a feeling that the next time I wouldn't be so lucky, and my mind just kept playing the scenario that could have happened. It may sound paranoid, but I'm a bit of a worst case scenario type person. So the person in the truck and creep that worked at the gas station, I hope that we never meet again. Like, ever. And to any young girls out there that have that same mentality that I had back then, I hope you realize that bad things can happen in the blink of an eye and you are not invincible before you end up in a situation like I was. So that, my friends, was another scary story collection. And the one where the girl was sneaking out, definitely don't do that. At least if you go anywhere, let somebody know. But it reminded me of our old house, one of the bedrooms, like the window, you could basically get right on top of the roof of the porch. I guess it was an in-screen porch. And I thought it'd be cool to just sit out on top of it and like look at the stars. The window was right there. You push it out, you wouldn't fall or anything. But I always had a fear that I would just fall through it, so I never did. I was boring, I guess. If you enjoyed this video, please do give it a like below. And if you'd like to hear more content like this, consider subscribing. And don't forget to leave a comment on your thoughts, or let me know if there's a certain type of video you'd like to hear. I'm always up for suggestions. And with that being said, friends, I hope you have a fantastic week. And until next time, take care.